Good evening, and welcome to the St. Petersburg by Night podcasting network. Tonight, we present to you our behind-the-scenes show, After Dark.
And welcome to the St. Pete by Night Twitch channel, where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. My name is Kent, also known as Michikent on all social media. I am the lead storyteller of St. Pete by Night, but because it's Saturday night, I'm not telling a story tonight. If anything, I am playing the role of host, as this is After Dark. Now, excuse me. For those of you who are unfamiliar with After Dark, it is our behind-the-scenes program where we step out of the world of darkness, pull back the veil, break the masquerade, pull back the curtain, and talk to the movers and shakers of the world of darkness. We talk to storytellers, we talk to players, we talk to writers, we talk to authors, we talk to creators, we talk to people who are involved in every aspect of the world of darkness as a whole, or this hobby of ttrpgs that we love so much. And we have a wonderful guest tonight. We are going to be talking to Stewart from 3 Gear Games, a local gaming store located in Laurel, Maryland. And I am so excited because I know it is every nerd's dream to own a gaming store. It's a dream that we all have, a fantasy in our minds to one day pursue this hobby and make it a profession, a reality. And so the opportunity to talk to someone who does that, who has made that into a reality, is such an exciting opportunity for all of us to witness. And having had a little chat with Stewart before we went live, he's also quite knowledgeable about the world of darkness as well, so we're going to be getting into that topic. But before we introduce Stewart officially, I want to mention we are back to having a giveaway tonight. We are giving away a free set of dice capable of being used in any World of Darkness game. It's a pretty standard set of purple and clear dice. You get the 10 purple, you get the 5 clear, and it's everything you need to run any system. It could be Vampire the Masquerade. It could be Hunt of the Reckoning. It could be Werewolf the Apocalypse. You can use these dice, and these dice have traveled. They have traveled all the way from St. Petersburg, Florida to Indianapolis, where they were used at Gen Con, and now they can be yours completely free. They will be shipped to you. All you have to do is put hashtag Dice Me Please PLZ in the chat throughout the night, and we will draw the winner of those dice at the end of the night and have those shipped off to them ASAP. But those dice could be yours. Now, without further ado, Stewart, welcome to After Dark. Introduce yourself, if you please.
Hello, my name is Stewart. I run Three Gear Games with my partner Lena, uh, where we are a comfortable, opening, welcoming local game store nestled between Baltimore and Washington.
Well, and one of the things that got you on our radar was how much you promote and push World of Darkness games in your gaming store, which is one of the things that a lot of gaming stores don't do. I mean, you'll see your Magic the Gathering, you'll see your Dungeons and Dragons, you'll see Pathfinder, very standard fare, Adventurer Society, all that kind of stuff. But World of Darkness, as it's always been, has kind of been a niche. Like maybe they'll have the core book if you're lucky at that game store. Maybe they'll have the Camarilla book, the Anarch book, but it's always going to be a very small kind of off to the side offering. But the fact that you openly promote and pursue the World of Darkness audience is a beautiful thing, of course, and it also really appeals to people like myself and our community who love the World of Darkness. So I want to get into that with you, and I want to get into your love of the World of Darkness. But let's go back. Let's make this into a story and start at the very beginning of your story. How did you first discover TTRPGs, and did you have any like preconceived notions about them before you actually started engaging in the hobby?
Starts with a treasure hunt.
Okay.
So way back when I was a little tyke of 8, I was shuffling around my attic with my sister, and we find this cardboard box with filled with books, and on the cover of the cardboard box there was a hand drawn, colored with colored pencils picture of a wizard and a warrior fighting a dragon by night. And we were just like, "Mom, Dad, what's this? What's this?" And we run down, and they say, "Well, tell you what, this next family vacation we'll show you." And what they had in there were a bunch of first edition books. They showed me my first character sheet, which I apparently filled out when I was 2. So it was just a bunch of crayon scribbles on a character sheet. And the character my dad made when I was born, um, which was Yobata, it's, just, it's a boy backwards.
That's
Um, and we played Dungeons and Dragons, and it started being like this was the family vacation thing, is that my dad would prepare a module and we'd go and play D&D. We quickly upgraded from first to second edition, so I had to start struggling with what the heck a THACO was. Um, I when I was in middle school, I brought it into my middle school, so I was that kid that went to the library with my friends, and we played D&D until the principal sat down with me and said, "You know, Stuart, in America, there is a separation between church and state." And we were like, "But this ain't religion."
it's not a
And
religion.
look at the symbolism here. He was totally in the whole satanic panic.
Right.
Um, and so, but we started running that, and my family started running magic tournaments from my house. And we ended up being a gathering point, particularly since my parents worked from home, where my friends gathered. We'd sit and watch TV and played games all day. Um, One of my friends from that brought up saying, it's like, well, I discovered this neat new role playing game. And he pulled out the second edition vampire stuff. And he got so deep in the lore. He was like, here's all the books, here's how all this stuff. And part of the day turned into him telling us stories from what was going on with the World of Darkness. Because he'd even like go down and read those little store quality novels.
Yeah.
Um, Time progresses. Had a really bad campaign of vampire in college. Um, and eventually About a year after I graduated from college, Wizards of the Coast started opening up game stores around the Maryland area. And I wandered into one of the first ones they opened up looking for a Shadowrun book. Um, and they had it, and I just on a whim, it's like, hey, you wouldn't happen to be hiring? And they're like, sure. And so we went in. They set up an interview, didn't even have to fill out any paperwork to any applications. And they interviewed, and I started working at the Owings Mills location. Met some of the other people. One of the guy was nuts for werewolf. Um, like he even like presented himself as like, yeah, I'm an old wolf. Um, and so when I started at Wizards of the Coast Retail, because it was when they were opening up one of their stores, it was literally like 2 weeks of playing board games just to make sure everyone knew the products. And in middle of that, the trainers would sit there and talk us about like policies and role playing through how to deal with different customers and stuff like that. And then we'd come together and I'd go over to this one guy's house where we would crash and we would sit down and we would play werewolf. Um, and that game went on in one form or another for about a year. After we finished the training, we continued. We meet going from one person's house to another's. We'd start playing on Friday night. People would pop in and out over the course of the night, fall asleep, surrounded by gaming books and the old Castlevania game. Wake up the next day, play through Saturday, fall back asleep, play through the end of Sunday, and then go back to our lives for the week.
I have so much nostalgia just off of that weekend explanation. Like, I'm taken back 25 years to the weekend long gaming like marathons I would do. And it's what a crazy
Oh.
time, but also what a special time, because that just reinforced my love of the hobby and made some friendships that I still have to this very day. But I absolutely love that story. Now I want to dissect that story a little bit though before we get into where you are now, because that covers so much material that there is to talk about.
Yeah.
Uh you said that your parents were into Dungeons and Dragons, which is
Yes.
an incredible thing because I've only talked to a very, very small handful of people who shared the hobby with their anyone in their family. And it was a very diverse kind of story coming from them, because some were, I hated it because my parents loved it, but then I eventually grew to love it. Or, I loved it, but then I didn't love the game they were playing, or whatever the case may be. But it sounds like it really was your parents who introduced you to and helped you fall in love with this hobby.
Hmm.
What can you remember about that first game? What did you play? What do you remember about that first experience, and what about it hooked you into the hobby as a whole? What made you want to keep coming back? Because I've also talked to people who had a very bad first experience,
Hmm.
but then had to try it again several years later, and that's when they fell in love with it. So, what can you remember about that time, and describe it to me if you could?
Not much. I was 8.
Fair.
Um,
That's fair.
but there is some puddles in and there of like that period of gaming. One thing to understand is like my parents were such geeks. My mom was LARPing before LARPing was a thing. She would interact. Her and my grandparents and their friends would reenact scenes from Lord of the Rings in middle of the Arizonan desert. Um,
Okay.
she has this whole story of when they were reenacting Helm's Deep, and like they found this nice flat roof house. Everyone would st- everyone that would stand on top of the house, throw water balloons down as other people played the orcs and come in. And one of their friends had this brilliant idea. And that scene where the orc comes in to go and blow up the wall to Helm's Deep, he ran in there with a propane tank, put it down, lit it. This pillar of fire shot up, and it was a blast, and everyone was like, "Yeah!" And then about an hour later, a police car came up, and they're like, "Did you guys happen to see a fireball up here, or a pillar of flame, or something like that?" And they're just like, "Nope, didn't see a
Nope,
thing.
nope, no idea.
Nope, nope, no idea what
Didn't
you're
see
talking
anything. Nope. Oh no. That's
about."
that's incredible though, because I've done LARPing and I
Yeah.
do remember playing Pretend, which is kind of a gateway into TTRPGs and LARPing to begin with,
Hmm.
the concept of playing Pretend, but it sounds like it's just been a part of your life all along, like, and their lives before that.
I
That's
mean, it's
amazing.
growing up on these cheesy fantasy movies, seeking out anything that was something something Robin Hood, something something Ivanhoe. My uncle had on VHS the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon that he would show us when he was babysitting us. It was just a part of the family culture. A few things I remember. First character,
Yep.
Leo Butterfingers, which was a fighter, named after a Final Fantasy One character that I made. Um, died by it, he died going after the Black Pearl. Um, by he we're going through this room that was covered in water, and he slipped and he fell down into the water, covered in all his heavy armor and stuff. And some of it was magic. And I was while I was down there, sharks would attack me, which was doing damage, and then I would took additional damage from drowning, all that stuff. Character died. Didn't even think maybe I should take off the armor. Um, my little 8-year-old self was just crying these big old crocodile tears like all night. Um, and at the end of the night, we sat down and made my second character.
So they were relentless. They didn't let you have like a get out of jail free card even at the age of 8. They were like, "Well,
No,
that's the
it's
consequence of not thinking strategically in this regard or whatever."
or it's like just the thought of like I kept on swimming and it's like nope, didn't swim well enough, and it's like didn't even think that it's like oh my magic armor's heavy.
Right. Yeah.
I was just like I'm dropping everything I can except for the armor and the weapons because that's magic and
That's
that's
what you
special.
need too. Like that's yeah. Oh my goodness. So being raised in the culture, which is amazing in its own right, I think that's kind of a
Mhm.
dream for some people in its own right. Because I've found a lot of people who turn to the gaming culture, the nerd culture, were either raised in a very conservative household that didn't accept these kinds of things, or it was just kind of part of the general makeup. It wasn't really highly featured. But being highly featured in your household, was there ever a time period where you maybe, especially like in middle school or high school, were you ever embarrassed by, or did you ever feel like you had to hide that part of you, uh, or did you just kind of openly, proudly embrace that as a part of your personality and as a part of your upbringing and everything like that? Because I think that people do go through phases like that, especially in those times where it wasn't as popular as it is now, when we didn't have a Marvel Cinematic Universe, and
Yeah.
D&D wasn't being streamed from hundreds of thousands of people. Like,
Shoot, man, we didn't
it
even
wasn't
think about what
huge.
streaming was.
Right, like it wasn't even a concept, and game stores were comic book stores, they weren't gaming stores. So like, did you ever go through phases of like being embarrassed by it, or was it just kind of something you were like loud and proud about regardless?
So I was a geeky kid even since I was beginning, and there's always other things inside of my life that made me not fit in with the crowd with school life inside of the crowd. I was a dyslexic kid that from early on was going to the special ed classes. I come from a religious minority. Um, and so there were these other things that would keep it so that I was frequently reminded that I'm not like other kids. And so it actually turned it so that I started actually rejecting everyone else that was trying to be normal. And I was like no. I'm special. I have
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons. No, I'm special. I play with these cards with funky pictures on it. Um, and
That's so awesome though, and that takes so much courage and so much strength to do. And honestly, if it weren't for people who were like that, I don't know if it ever would have become openly acceptable. You
yeah,
know,
and
I don't know if it would have ever made the mainstream, but it's because
I,
people were confident and took that risk that it did. So that's incredible. Anyway, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
I have friends that did go through phases where they're like, let I don't want to talk to these people about what I do,
Right.
but at the same time, Avalon Hill was in our backyard. That's a Baltimore-based company.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a part of the gaming industry that was baked into the area around here. I mean, Sid Meier's, Firaxis, Bethesda Soft, all of those companies are local here, as well as you get all the geeky people that work in the government.
Right.
Um, as like some of my best customers are working in National Archives. Um, the right now above my head playing board games. Um,
So yeah, you've got a nice community around you
yeah.
and have for quite some time that kind of has embraced this before even. So there you had your people. Those people
Yes.
were around you, so you never really did have to feel completely ostracized or to completely put off. You could find people to connect with. That's so amazing and incredible. So let's fast forward a little bit from there. You got into D&D and having had it around in some fashion or another growing up, it makes sense why you would just kind of embrace and get hooked immediately. It was destined for you. The path was already there. But Vampire World of Darkness comes into your life, second edition, like you were saying. What was it about World of Darkness that caught your attention or caught? Because it's not fantastical like a lot of other games are. I don't know if it appeals the same way to people who love their Dungeons and Dragons or their Pathfinder. Like it takes a certain, and I think that's why it's still kind of niche, a certain audience to get hooked by it. So, what can you remember in more
Well,
detail about that time period and what hooked you about this
remember
particular game?
back in the 90s, Vampire used to occupy the same space that Pathfinder occupies now. It was the alternative
That's
to
true.
D&D.
That is true.
Um, and so it's like if you weren't playing D&D and you're role playing, chances are you're playing Pathfinder. Or you're playing Vampire.
That's true.
Um, and my a lot of my friends really love the lore of that one, and so a lot of that I was through most of it I was picking up from osmosis. My friends were talking about it, um, while I would sit down and draw my little fantasy, my little knights in shining armor and things like that. Um, and it was that werewolf game when I started working with at WotC that really started sinking into the world. And from the stories that my one friend would tell, and then talking about the lore, talking about the stories, talking about all the different changing breeds through werewolf, that were out there, that it really started grabbing my fascination, my attention. Um, and we would just go from like one game to another and thinking about like, well, what does that mean? The whole um the idea that a section of the book would talk about, it's like this is a faction. This is how it feels about the other factions and the storytelling. It's truly what made World of Darkness different compared to everything that Genesis from the war game D&D, that made it special because it was, even when we weren't playing, we were telling stories around it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there was so much like it appealed to that time period too because I was like in my early teenage years. I was starting to
Hmm.
kind of discover counterculture and to find my own rebellion, and so dark and edgy, it's like when your favorite ninja turtle turns from Leonardo or Michelangelo to Raphael, like when you get that kind of edge to you and you want something gritty. Like World of Darkness and especially Vampire definitely appealed to that. But one of the things I loved about the system itself was its emphasis on lore and character
Yeah.
and the fact that not everybody was supposed to get along, that they weren't going to get along. Whereas in D&D it's obviously like the party is what matters. The party is everybody is working towards a
It
similar goal. They didn't want you to have rivalries within the party as much, or didn't at least encourage it.
it
Whereas in Vampire, and yeah, go ahead.
it emphasized the value of diversity
Yes.
before D&D started embracing that message,
Yes.
because it really underlined the thing that these are people who are part of the same bigger group, but they have their different points of view and they think differently, even though they can still work together and get along.
Yes. Yeah.
um and like I drifted towards changeling and werewolf, where a lot of people did go for drift towards vampire, because I like the hope in changeling, before it was about abuse.
Right.
um
Before it did turn dark, like it inevitably does. But
uh well, I mean, like Darkness was there even in the second
right.
edition changeling
Right.
stuff. It just, my teenage brain didn't recognize it. I like
Right.
the honor of the werewolf, and not the hopelessness of fighting against the machine. Um, and so it's like, even now I tend to, with the way I run games, I trend towards the Vampire by Twilight, not the dark stories. But we have GMs that are really excited about it, that's willing to go into those dark stories where where they can sit there and say, I am going to beat your character up and you're gonna like it. Um, but I tend to be like yeah, let's have a fight around Fort McHenry on the 4th of July. Yeah, totally. They snuck a luxury yacht with rocket launchers next to it and fired it at the fort. That totally would work.
So yeah, you do enjoy more of the kind of adventure
Yeah.
and aspiration and the ambition part of the stories of werewolf and everything like that, and a little less of like the really dark gritty undertones. But that's cool. I think you need that to
Yeah.
balance it out, because I do agree that a lot of what World of Darkness has struggled with societally in the past is the people who put too much emphasis on the dark side of the game, which is something we talked a little bit about before we started streaming tonight. Was that like a lot of bad people kind of found an excuse to tap into their inner beasts, their inner urges, the things that this was their excuse to be toxic or their excuse to be predatory. It kind of gave them that outlet, and caused them to do some bad things, like cause their own a satanic panic of their own for Vampire the Masquerade specifically
Well,
in
it's still during the
Florida.
era.
Yeah, during that era. So yeah, I want you to talk a little bit about that. How do you manage balancing those scales, and what keeps you balanced in that regard?
One of the great things one of the many great things that this franchise has brought to the gaming environment is that they were the first ones talking about the safety tools, in part because they needed to. We keep a lot of that balance, particularly since we have a lot of people who, at least at one, who are complete strangers playing with each other.
Yeah.
And so we keep the X card right there on the table, so that if it starts being too real, people can be like, dude, we need to X card. And they can dial it back. Um, the but ultimately, it's the kids that tried to start a blood cult in Florida is in some ways very similar to the guy who was wandering around sewer tunnels with playing supposedly playing out his D&D fantasies, that got a lot of attention, because a lot of that story was false.
Yeah.
um, it was just he happened to play D&D once and twice, where people br- it, people will bring their pain and their difficulties to the game sometimes, and but it's not the game that brought it out. They bring it to the game and put it on display.
Right.
Um, and so like the two kids in Florida, as I understand it, very repressive family, trying to find a way out, and their way out was to clutch onto this fantasy. The guy in the guy the that wandered around the sewers playing out his D&D fantasy, he was trying to run away from his family. I actually have friends that went to his university while he was there. And he was trying to express his own sexuality during a time when he absolutely couldn't. Um, and so they're coming in with these pains and then playing out those pains, and that's turning into terrible things. The safety tools we have now, the lines and veils, the consent checklists that have been coming up, makes it so not only can you openly talk about what is what makes you vulnerable and what you want to engage with and what you don't want to engage with, but it also means that people can move with more confidence to get more serious, more deep, more possibly disturbing games, because they can go with confidence of, if I say this and someone's not cool, they have a way to say, dude, that's not cool without hurting anyone's feelings.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful thing, and I'm glad to see that it has become common practice. Because
Yeah.
honestly, up until about 4 years ago, I had never actually heard of safety tools. I'd read about them, like you said, like, World of Darkness had kind of started the trend of emphasizing them early on. But I was always playing with my friends and we always knew one another. It was when I started kind of venturing out and meeting strangers, and, especially during the pandemic when it was online gaming only and you were playing with
Yeah.
randomly thrown together groups, was it really introduced to me. But I'm so glad that they exist and they're kind of expected now. It's not even, odd for it to be proposed. It's a part of the expectation when
Yeah.
coming into a game or a group. What are the safety tools? What are the expectations? And especially in services, like Start Playing or any of these gaming services, Roll20, that's part of the package that's expected with it
Yeah.
as well. And so I'm so glad that that has become part of the mainstream philosophy of gaming, or the gaming expectations out there,
Not to
especially around.
mention
Yeah.
the overall emotional intelligence of the populace as a whole right now
Yes.
is so much greater than it was back in the day. Um, Back in my day of anyway, the emotional intelligence so much there. The insights I get from my Gen X friends or my Gen Z friends is so insightful, and this is all stuff that's just commonly out there and discussed about. Um, so it's helpful as a whole to make sure that these things don't happen, and so these games can be games. And then if you really want that emotional attachment, you go to the Nordic LARPing tradition, where it's like, so in this phase of the game, we're going to turn off the lights and contemplate death for about 5 minutes. Have fun.
Yeah, let's get really cerebral about this. Yeah, and I think that there is a place for TTRPGs to be used as mental health tools, especially over recent years. A lot of therapists have started instituting them as methods of you know empathy or self exploration. But I think that as a whole, the hobby was never intended to be that, and I think that anybody who is kind of seeking that kind of solace in TTRPGs needs to be more considerate of who they're potentially subjecting to that process. I mean, they may not even be doing it intentionally or consciously, but there's a reason that the professionals are the ones instituting that, and not every DM should be expected to also be a therapist for every player in their group. or
No.
every storyteller should be able to do group therapy, because
I mean, I'm not equipped to do that.
I am not either. We are not qualified. But yeah,
But
I think that's a good thing to bring up.
oh yeah, I mean, it's like what is at its conception, what was this hobby intended to be? It was a version of let's go take your Warhammer generals and what if they worked together as a special ops team?
Yep.
And that's exactly what it was originally. And games like Vampire in the unintelligible version it was with its first edition was just absolutely um was an absolute rebellion against the but the fights
Yeah.
um and it's great. I mean, because it's
Well, and it's improv theater. It's improv
yeah.
theater with a premise. Like, they gave you a premise and then they gave you free reign to play within that premise, or even go outside of that premise if you want.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
what's the name of their LARPing system?
right, right. Like, there's what is there? There's Laws of the Night, and then there's oh my god, what
Theater of the
Theater of
Mind.
the Mind. That's right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We
Um,
literally have a permanent piece of gaming lexicon because of their first LARPing system.
yeah,
Which that bookshelf behind you, we actually have it up there for people to reference.
that's fantastic. So yeah, let's get into that. Let's talk about how this story led to getting involved in the gaming business. You said you got a job with Wizards of the Coast
Yep.
after going and finding a Shadowrun book and then asking if they were hiring. So talk me through what it was like working there. And then you had mentioned that you had left and gone overseas for a while. So let's continue the story from that point.
So I was working with Wizards of the Coast throughout my college years, starting when I was a freshman in college, and doing that World of Darkness, that werewolf game, all the way till just after graduated and they closed down because Hasbro saw the potential of a trust being formed. Um, and I mean, it was a retail job. Yeah, you were dealing with a lot of the stuff you loved, and you could be around what you loved, but there was also a whole thing where I had to embrace the fact that the thing that I did for my own fun was also the thing I was doing for a profession. And sometimes that means, most of the time, that means that if you feel like playing or not, guess what? You gotta play.
Yeah.
And that consent, the fact that I have to do it if I like it or not, means that it's no longer play for me. Um, that was a whole mind trip.
No, absolutely. I
um,
loved movies. Working at Blockbuster Video was not fun. Like
yeah,
it made me sick of movies for a while after like 5 or 6 years, because you lose the ability to choose to engage in that thing, to choose to talk about that thing. You're just kind of
yeah.
forced to for work. So I totally get that mindset.
And if it's like, even if it's like a game you don't like, or the game you hate, or a game you don't give a
You got to sell it. You got to make
you
them want it. Yep.
the way that I was a judge for the Dragon Ball Z card game. I do not give two flying femore about about the Dragon Ball Z trading card game.
Right.
When I was taking the judge's exam, it was literally I was sitting there with a piece of paper, and these little middle school kids were sitting there whispering, telling me the answers as I was going down, just so they could have their tournaments.
Oh,
Um,
jeez. Oh my goodness.
um, but it's and then you're around, and then particularly like after Wizards shut down, and I went through the very painful 6-month process of them spinning down the stores, hearing this store shut down, then that store that shut down. I was in the Arundel Mills Mall, which was one of the biggest locations in my district. Um, and so we were one of the last ones to close down, and they it was such a painful process of just seeing everything just shrink down and close down. It was like corporate hospice care,
Hmm.
particularly when they got this really cutthroat liquidation company in to go and pull it through, to get us through it all. They even stiffed a lot of us on some of our bonus checks for sticking it through, finding one excuse or another. It's like, no, you don't get it because of this. Um, and then I spent a year with my mom's architecture firm, and then there I talked over to my dad, and we decided to open up a game store together. He owned it. He had everything. I was just working there. Um, and that's when it really was hitting home because it was getting into that small business thing. So it's not just I am there for a paycheck and all the corporate stuff that goes back and forth on that. It's the I need to, if I don't do this, I can't just assign it to the next person. I can't just ask another employee to do it or a coworker to do it. If I don't do it, it doesn't get done.
Right.
And that really brought in a lot of the stress. And with that, there's a lot of my enthusiasm for gaming that kind of melted away. Um, there is a book called there's a book that's out there that talks about a 5-year process of opening up a game store and bringing it to a middle class income. And one thing they talk about is losing your soul to the business. And that was a very painful thing that I had to confront with because even with that level, it wasn't my money fueling the business, but I was in there sometimes 40, 80, 60, 80 hours a week. Um, and every now and then having to purposefully do stuff to remind myself this is why we love this game.
Hmm.
This is why we love doing this stuff. It's a
Well, I think
numbing
that's a
experience.
valid point too, because I think that even in like modern American work culture, people forget that time is a currency of its own right. Time has value, and to each individual, time can have different value. You know, how much is your time worth is really the question that people are asking themselves when they go to apply for new jobs or when they are working at their current job. It's like, is this worth the amount I'm getting paid? And so, even if it wasn't your personal financial investment in the job that you were doing, it is your time investment.
Yeah.
And one thing that we can't get more of is time. We can make more money, we can lose money and then get it back. We can't make more time. Our
Oh yeah.
time, and it's very, we're going to get dark here for a second. We are only promised, and not even really promised, we are only offered a certain amount of time, and it is constantly ticking away from us. So those are things to consider. How much do you want to invest into something, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a job, whether it's a profession, or whatever the case may be? So I think it's a very good point that you brought up, that like that can hurt your love of the thing that you are doing when it does become a profession or when it does become an obligation or responsibility, because you
Or
are spending more of that currency.
it's also just the saturation of attention.
Yes.
Because variety is the spice of life. You need to go there, and that's why, like right now, I know a lot of people in the game industry from all these, and not just the hobby game industry, but also the video game industry and things like that. And the things that people do, particularly when crunch time comes up, in order to make sure that they are able to keep their love for what they do, because so much we are still in an industry of passion.
Yeah.
Even though we're now seeing people coming in there because of the good business opportunities, even though we're seeing franchises popping up, um, it is still a business where the majority of the people are doing it out of the love of doing it. And so you got to figure out how to do that. And part of that is like, I know lots of people who go to goth nights all the time. I know people who go to these historic reenactment nights or join these other communities just to keep their love of life. And so when they go back to their gaming, they can see the love of the game still there in their work life.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, what else did we learn from the One of the lessons that we can walk away with from the pandemic is we had a brief period of time when people couldn't work and they were being handed money in order to make sure that they could keep up their livelihood.
Right.
And while our employment numbers plummeted, I was sitting there working frantically just to keep what little of my new business, because that was like my 1 year anniversary was being celebrated
Jeez.
during the shutdown. Um, but we're looking at the economic numbers, and it's yeah, employment numbers plummeted. A lot of people thought they were doing their employees a favor by letting them go when the pandemic started up. But we also saw all these people. We had the highest rate of new businesses started in history during the shutdowns in 2020.
Yeah.
And it took 2 years before people started saying, it's like, this isn't working out.
Right.
Or sometimes it's working out fabulous. And now we have Foam Brain Games working, doing things.
Absolutely.
And so we can see as Americans, it reassured one of the things I feel strongly about our country is that we like to work. What will we do when we are working on what we want instead of what we have to?
Well, and that's what we were originally pitched, right? Like that's what we were pitched when we were coming up as kids is that like America was the land of opportunity. It was supposed to be this, place where you can pursue what you want, the American dream, blah 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 blah
Mm-hmm.
blah, which we all know to be some masquerade propaganda at this point. But it's true though. Like imagine if you said, "Hey, you want to be a farmer? Here's a farm. Hey, you want to be a doctor? Like we're not going to charge you more than you can ever afford in your entire life to do it. We're going to make that a possibility. Hey, you want to be an entertainer? Like go entertain."
Yeah.
When given that opportunity, the things that can be created. I mean, part of why we have a lot of the things we have that we take for granted now was because once upon a time that world did exist and then it went away because companies ended up growing and needing workers and blah 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 everything since then.
I'm
uh but
I'm not
yeah,
enti- I'm not entirely convinced that the world that world that we were promised ever really existed, but we were closer to it in the past.
right, right.
Um, but like, and then one of the things I'm loving right now about running my werewolf game is that I'm going around and I'm actually able to go and dig up all this stuff about like American folklore. Um, I actually had a session where my players went down and they hunted down a snelligaster in order to go and fry it up and feed it to their sept be as a test to prove that they were ready to be a pack together.
Interesting. Okay.
And out of this, most people ask the same question. What the heck is a snelligaster?
I was thinking that,
But
yes.
the fact that you get to go and you can sit there and you look about these and find these different things in American folktales that we just don't talk about anymore. Snellgaster is a creature that was up around the Frederick area in Maryland. Um, it's like a one-eyed dragon with a bird's beak, and tentacles would shoot from its mouth in order to suck blood and beer. Um, and it has a cry like a train horn, and it's the size of a blimp, to the point where Teddy Roosevelt put out a bounty for a Snelligaster's corpse that is still active through the Smithsonian today.
Wow.
Um, and he skipped out on an international dinner so he could go on a hunt for the Snelligaster. Um, and so they went and they hunted one and they found it and they ran up on the wrong side of the law, and so they went up, they had to skip up to Pennsylvania to cook it, and then they came down to their sept and said, "Here,
That's
teriyaki
amazing.
style."
That's amazing. So you told me a story that you decided to go move over to Japan for like a period of about 6 years, kind
Yes.
of bringing things back. And you said you got to really experience the gaming culture in Japan. What was that experience like, and what would you say are some of the biggest differences between American gaming culture and Japanese gaming culture?
Probably the biggest thing you get is that they have their system with their gaming environment. And I think it has to do with how they embrace small business and the arts.
Okay.
But they have a system able so that they have this whole vibrant community of these cottage industry game designers where they would go and they'd make these games and they'd print them up in their apartments. And then one of the game distributors in Japan would hold a couple times a year Tokyo Game Market, and they had another one in Osaka. They had another one up in Hokkaido, and people would pay $600 to get booths, and they'd sell their little game that they made in their apartments. And some of them are as simple as here are three cards. We're going to deal them out, and we're going to try to figure out who's the bad guy. And
Okay.
that was it.
Yeah.
um, but this is also ones where if games like Love Letter grew up in. And the whole micro game movement that happened a few years back, where it's just these small little games that there's a lot of play in a few components. And they even bring that into their role-playing games, where Call of Cthulhu is still huge there. And the students were shocked to pieces that I actually knew what Cthulhu was. And I was like, my dude,
That's
in America, we also have corn.
right. Yeah. We also have things that you would know of here also, but no, that is a very interesting, because it does seem that like things like fantasy and art and culture, like it's all one. It's
Yeah.
all kind of embraced over there. I think that's why like anime has finally gotten really big over here over the past like 20, 30 years. Is It's always been ingrained into their culture that they've always had fantastical and dark and horror based elements, and they've had the freedom to express it in ways that America has kind of slowly been adapting to and adopting. And so, yeah, it makes sense that it's kind of still startling to them that we are discovering these things.
It's to the point where other governments it's really how they manage their cultural properties. Um, and it's to the point where the other governments around the world will pay the Japanese government in order to teach them how to maintain their cultural heritage. And a part of that is funding new arts. There's a huge gate that you have to get through to enter their fine arts system, but it's there. Um, but it's a beautiful thing. And I would love to see America get better at embracing the cottage industry scale, because as much as we're like we are inundated with so many games through Kickstarter.
Yeah,
It is you can't even keep up.
no,
Um, but even Kickstarter, you need to get a certain level of scale, and you need to invest. I think the last person I talked to said it's like if as a new game designer, if you want to go and start a Kickstarter, you have to invest $10,000 to get that Kickstarter page up and running, just to even try to access that capital. And that capital is all monetizing your social media.
absolutely.
Um, and that in comparison to hey, I made this game in my apartment. We made 20 of them. Do you want to buy one? It's just a huge difference.
Absolutely. Well, for example, I was at Gen Con earlier this year in August, and I was absolutely just, my brain melted being there and seeing the variety of games that were being played and shown. And I know that is only a small, like, micro sample of the games that are offered or available in the, obviously in the world or out there right now, because the qualifications to even get into Gen Con are so high, and the requirements are so high, and the costs are so high. So to just think that, like,
And
is,
it's
yeah,
mainly the cost.
yeah.
The cost is the big barrier.
So I would ask you this, and this is kind of a philosophical theory: is it an oversaturated market? Are we oversaturated at this point? Is it that there is too much selection, or do you think it's a good thing that it is just continuing to grow and grow and that there are more offerings available? Because though the role playing market and the gaming market has become a little more mainstream and more people are buying into it, I still think it's niche enough that there's only so many mouths to feed.
Have
And
you seen what they've been coming up with in the indie space?
St. Petersburg by Night is brought to you through collaborations with our partnered vendors Wolfpack Dice, Ember Fox Dice, Dragon Ink Dice, Bear the Bard, Champs Tramps, Penshi Artista, and Chromatic Creations. Links to our partnered vendors, as well as our Twitch and YouTube channels, can be found on our website, stpbynight.com. The official theme song for St. Petersburg by Night is Vampire by Faith and Failure. You could find them at faithandfailure.com. You can follow St. Pete by Night on all socials with the hashtag St. Pete by Night. If you wish to support our program, you can do so at coffee.com/St. Pete by Night to help keep the stories rolling.
I
tell
mean,
me, enlighten me.
Wanderhome,
Okay.
an entire game where there's no combat, where you're a found family wandering the countryside in Howl's Moving Castle,
That's amazing.
as in the queer role play. It's out of the queer role playing space.
Okay.
Same company came up with one called Coven that I heard about, where it's a three-person role playing game where you're playing different members of a witch's coven, and you're exploring. You're drawing cards that work as the game master or the storyteller, and it's giving you the different challenges that you get to role play through. There is some beautiful things that are coming up. The biggest problem I'm seeing with a lot of these game companies and a lot of these games that are coming out is the scale they have to hit in order to exist.
Oh, sure.
Um, and you have to hit a certain level of popularity to do that. We are one of the smallest players in our market. And a lot of the reason why we're small is because we sat down and we said, what if we make the game room first? And a lot of the other stores said, there are all these established game store models that we know, and we're going to do that. And that made it so it's so easy for them to get bigger faster because they focused on D&D, Warhammer, and Magic.
Right.
And the fact of the organized play and how easy it is to run D&D in a store is one reason why we're seeing so much more D&D and Pathfinder being run in stores instead of all these other role playing. Right now, I'd say that there's a practical homogeneity going on with role playing games. And while there's more games than ever that you can go into, the effort that you have to put in to discover them is so much more work because of just because when you're going into a shop and it's like I'm looking for a game to play, um most of what they're going to be offering is Adventures League and D&D, which is not just D&D, but it's a specific style of D&D being run
Right.
that is made so that no matter what game store you go into, you get the same experience.
Right.
Pathfinder Society and Starfinder Society does the same thing. It's not as bad, or bad isn't even the word. It's not. You get more flexibility with
It's not
them.
as generic. It's not, or it's
Yeah,
not as, like, locked in.
but it's still there.
Right.
Um, opposed to seeing game stores when I was a kid, because there's some legacy stores around us, um, where part of joining the role playing culture is learning how to approach role playing games, period. So we didn't have a whole lot of these people who are like, I just play this one TTRPG. It's more of the, wait a minute, you got one about playing kobolds, finding candy in space, surrounded by Cthulhu. Bring it on.
Yeah. And I
Where games like Paranoia could actually it could actually evolve. Um, because and I mean, like, one reason why we went to World of Darkness in our shop in the first place is because I remember the switch over to fourth edition.
Mhm.
As hot as D&D is, and thank God that they haven't fumbled their switch over to the new revised books,
Right.
because when they screwed up their switch over to fourth edition, man, the entire gaming market shrunk by a quarter. Not just the D&D
Those
players,
were very dark days.
but everyone's game
Hmm.
shrank by a quarter.
Well, and I think that was the same thing that happened when Chronicles of Darkness, which was not called Chronicles of Darkness originally, for anybody who remembers, they called it World of Darkness to their own fault.
Yeah,
Um, when that switchover happened, I remember that being a huge mistake, misstep that they did end up kind of correcting for a while, but it
yeah,
really, it really did hurt them in the long term of things. Yeah, the fourth edition craze, because that was kind of the fourth edition of World of Darkness as well,
yeah.
just screwed everything up. Um, but yeah, thankfully fifth editions have kind of brought everything back to a certain degree. But I
And
want to talk more. Oh yeah, go ahead.
they just dropped and Wizards just dropped their 2024 books, and
Yep,
that switchover appears to have gone over well, which means it's easier for me to pull people in with that, and then say, here's the rest of the world. So when Wizards does stick their foot in their mouth again, because it's a matter of
it's
time,
only a matter of time.
instead of saying, "Up, my game's done, bye," we can say, "How would you like to do that, but in the real world?"
Right.
Or "How would you like to do that, but in space?"
Yeah. I want to talk about the model of your store as well as running your store and that kind of the entire story around that. But before we do that, I want to remind people that we are having a giveaway tonight. If you didn't see it in the chat earlier, we are giving away a free set of dice that can be used in any World of Darkness Chronicle, or if you're just a dice goblin who likes pretty shiny math rocks, we are giving away a 15 dice set that can be used in any World of Darkness setting, whether it's Vampire the Masquerade, Hunter the Reckoning, or Werewolf the Apocalypse. We've got 15d10, 10 of them purple, 5 of them clear, and they can be used in any game setting. They can be yours tonight by putting the hashtag DiceMePlease PLZ in the chat, and we will be drawing the winner of that before the end of the stream tonight. So enter and get into the running for that free set of dice.
My dude, who makes the dice?
I ordered them online, so I'm not entirely sure. I ordered a big set online to bring to Gen Con. But now I want to talk about your store, Three Gear Games, which
Yeah,
can be found online at threegearstudios.com. You can see the website up on your screen right now. So let's talk about Three Gear Games. Let's talk about this model that you were mentioning earlier, just a few moments ago. You said you wanted to emphasize the game space as opposed to, like, making it about Warhammer or making it about Magic the Gathering. Tell me about what the kind of the planning phases were for the store and what you were looking to do and how that's worked out since.
so one of the changes that happened over the gaming industry while I was in Japan, here in the States, is the way people started thinking about their game rooms changed. Because for years upon years upon years upon years, the game room was advertising space. You offered games in your store so people would come in and then support your store by buying the stuff. online comes in there. Extra Credits has a fantastic video over about the death of the local game stores. Um, Online comes in, people start ordering a lot of their games online, some of which cheaper than sometimes it's cheaper for us to buy our games from Amazon than our distributors. Um, and so game stores started, a lot of them started charging for their game room space. So we're like, what would happen if instead of doing a more traditional model of like, let's go bring in all this product, sell the product, and then offer or even charge for the game room, but emphasize the product sales, what if we said we're going to try to give you the best play experience possible? Um, and try to make it inclusive, trying to make it so that it talks to the populations that most game stores don't. Because let's get real here, most game stores, if you talk to them about inclusivities, they usually say the same thing: we're open to everyone. There's an
Right.
old advertisement adage that says that if you are open to if you're advertising to everyone, you're advertising to no one. And so we actually tried to build our stores not only as a game space first, so that we can introduce games and teach people games and all that stuff first, um, and people could special order the games on the side if they wanted to. And then we'd bring them in and all that stuff, and we'd keep a few things on the shelf, but it's mainly a play space, and people would pay for the play space. Um, and that was in 2019, as foreshadowed earlier. Pandemic hit, and we were sitting here saying, we built a store around getting people together. How can we continue this when people can't actually get together? I tell you, that Discord went from nothing to running in about 6 hours.
Yeah.
And we got most of our customers on that Discord in that 6 hour time block, getting the messages out, telling them that it's like, we're going to keep on trying to play stuff there. Um, but we also lost contact with our store because we were in a mall settings. Mall settings were the first things to get shut down. And so we started ordering stuff, having it shipped to our house because we couldn't do curbside pickup. We started actually just shipping out of our house. And so we started building up a retail inventory so that it's like, well, people can't play with us, but they can still buy stuff with us. Um, and so that started building. Um, People started going back to stores. A lot of the stores that went with a more traditional model continued to be able to grow faster. Um, I know there's a lot of stories about game stores closing around all around us. We're not seeing any in that in our local environment. Um, and so we started building up on the retail stuff. And as part to make sure that we could handle things like minimum orders and stuff like that, we started also reaching out to local artisans so that we actually sell stuff that's made in our local community. Um, Knowing what we know of the game industry, starting to diversify our offerings, so we're not just offering D&D, we're offering World of Darkness, so that there's attracted a few other people who are like, I want something that's not D&D, because no matter how popular the popular thing is, there's going to be
Right.
people who want something else.
Yeah.
And we took, because we're a game space first, we still keep to the attitude that we don't care what you run, just as long as you run it with us. So we have a lot of these indie games that sometimes get run with us as long as we can find people to play it.
Yeah.
And that means that often we have a flood of GMs, but not enough players to fill all their games. Um, because they're like, I get an opportunity to run Hollow Earth. That campaign lasted for 3 years before the guy had to move away.
Wow.
Um, And we also started building what you see behind me is our is our role playing library. So even if we can't get a hold of a book, you can still reference it. And so we got in there D&D first edition. We have second edition World of Darkness for all four: vampire, werewolf, changeling, and mage. we got third edition for all those, plus
Yeah.
the generic one that you have to deal with. Um, and as books come out, particularly the player supplements, we're trying to get those into the systems. Um, and of course, it led us to doing other things where we've really taken the attitude of we're running the game store we want to run, not trying to follow models so we can follow the money. But in the end, the fact of the matter is the money is the lifeblood that you get to deal with. And one of those things that loses your soul is the fact that is trying to get the money as fast as possible so that you can be as stable as possible and start employing as many people as possible. So it's not just a two-person shop where people are just going where you're driving each other crazy because you can't get out you can't join your own games
Right, where you're working
because you got
yourself
to
to
watch the
death.
store.
Right. Right. Yeah, you want it. You need a certain amount of expansion to continue to appreciate and enjoy doing it. Otherwise, it is just going to work you into the ground and work you to death. But I
Yeah.
think that there's something to the model that you're talking about. Yes, the money is a necessary part of it. But if I've learned anything about business and whatnot, if you have a product or if you create a service that people love, they will want to see it continue. Like they
Yes.
will be more likely to invest in it if they fall in love with it first rather than if you're nickel and diming them right out the gate.
So
Like, yeah, continue.
every year we have a charity drive. It we do it alongside of Extra Life, so we're on an Extra Life team and all that stuff. And we turn the entire game store into a big convention, into a little convention hall, to run games for that 24 hours. One of the things we put out there is our pay what you want tables. People will donate their games to us, and we'll put it on those tables. Sometimes buy a few for our own libraries. Um,
Yeah.
and people will then come and pay whatever they want for those products to help our charity drive for John Hopkins Children's Hospital. And so we got people recycling their old games. It's like, I'm
Hmm.
not going to play this anymore. Here's a way for me to get rid of it. People who can't afford $50 books can get their role playing books. And it may not be the latest edition, but they can get them. And we raise money for the for the children.
Right.
And I've seen people spend $75 for an Uno deck just because they want to give.
Yeah.
I've also seen families fund their entire Christmas shopping through our charity drive and get a box as big as yeah, as big as the window here for like $100 and feeling bad that they couldn't give more, but we're happy because they gave what they could.
Right.
And that means that they were able to give everyone they wanted to give presents to presents because of that. And it means that we have a trust with our customers
You've
that
established goodwill. You've established goodwill with your community through your charitable acts. You've established goodwill through your customer base, through your willingness to, negotiate and be
yeah,
flexible with them. And those people who couldn't spend as much as they wanted to one year might come back several years later and be able to spend way more. Like it's a
yeah.
give and take, but being that having that goodwill established and that flexibility established is so vital and important.
But the other
And
part of it
yeah,
is that we as the business owners trust our customers. And this is something that I haven't seen in any other game store I've worked in.
for sure.
And that's so powerful that I could go in there with that trust for those people who come in. And I think it shows through. And it means that like we've had people come up on deployment up around the DC area, find our store, play at our store, go back home, try to find a store like us, and not be able to.
Yeah. Well, word
We're
of
not
mouth
like
is
other
so
stores.
powerful too. It's so powerful to establish that goodwill because they're going to tell their friends and they're going to tell their friends. And if it comes from a reliable source, not from an advertisement, not from a flyer or a magazine, but from a
Hmm.
person that they trust saying, "Hey, I love these guys. I have conversations with the owner. I play there all the time." That's where you're going to draw more people in because they trust those people. And I mean, even your library, which I think is an amazing feature that you offer that I have not seen anywhere else, is such a cool thing to offer because it does require trust in your customers. Like I can hear people thinking in my own thoughts like, how do you know someone's not going to just slip one of those books in their bags and walk off?
They
Maybe they
have.
will, but you're taking that chance, and by putting that trust in your customers, you're building that goodwill with the ones that won't do that, and showing offering them something that they can take advantage of but not abuse. And it is a risk, but it's a risk worth taking to build
Yeah.
that goodwill and trust.
And people have slipped books in their bags and walked off with them, and then they brought them back, saying, "Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to."
Right, because they don't want to
Uh,
ruin that chance, that
and
goodwill that's been established.
and it helps that we got stickers on the inside so people can see
That
that it's
helps too.
ours.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's like the fact of the matter is that people love to be at our store. And I mean, as a whole in the gaming industry, one of the things about gaming retail that I've was able to experience that I haven't that I don't hear from other industries, but I'm sure it does come up in other sectors of retail, is that almost to a T, everyone wants to be at the shop. So a lot of the nightmare customer stories I just haven't experienced. The worst I had was while I was closing down the Wizards of the Coast store, some lady didn't trust my manager that the store was closing and so all sales were final, and she wanted to exchange something, so we had to do a slow speed chase as she tried to run off with something that wasn't hers.
Jeez. But yeah, well, again, like when you have a good relationship, when you give trust, you get trust. When you are flexible, they'll be flexible and understanding with you. Like you have to give to get, and I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
that's something that you have shown in your willingness to offer that kind of that opportunity to your customers, and I think that that's a fantastic thing. One
And
thing that you also do really well, and I want to praise you for, is your massive social media presence. One thing that I've found with a lot of my local gaming stores around my area is like maybe they have a Facebook, maybe they have a Twitter, maybe they have a website. There's some that don't even have websites in my area, which I'm like, how do you even survive? But like, you cover all of the bases. Like, you have a Facebook, you have a meetup, like, you have everything you can possibly offer out there. So it's almost impossible not to find you. What pushed you in that direction? What caused you to pursue that way of doing it? Because it is so smart. And I want to actually bring up your link tree here, because I think it's invaluable resource for people who want to find out more about your stop or your shop. It's at linktree/3gear games. They've got everything on there, including their Discord, their Facebook, their Instagram, just everything you can find, all the links in the world. So go support them there. But what was the inspiration or the impetus to pursue such a online presence?
my partner.
Okay.
Pure and simple. She's a I get such anxiety because like I said, I was a special ed kid. I have dyslexia. And with the era of the internet that I grew up around, people were so mean about the about every single misspelling and things like that. So I get a lot of anxiety around social media and a lot of the online stuff. I have trouble even writing emails. Um, she's trying to get me to use the new AI stuff to try to get it so I
Oh
can do
boy.
that stuff.
Yeah.
It is a trip, I tell you. It's an exercise in modern stereotyping. Um, but so I pretty much let her go ham on whatever she wants to do in social media. On top of that, she is a really big introvert.
Okay.
Like I can put her on the sales floor a couple days a week, and then she's just done for the rest of the week. So so a lot of times she gets to just sit in the back room, do whatever she thinks is best to grow the business. And part of that is that the incredible social media presence that we have. And there's things that we would love to do more of. I mean, I would love to make more contents for YouTube and things like that.
Sure.
If you, I know that if that gets big enough, that could be an income stream and an advertiser instead of just an advertiser. Um, but so she just every opportunity she gets fascinated by all this new technology that comes up and all these new services that come up. Um, and so she'll just run with it. She'll try everything. And the stuff that doesn't work, she drops. The stuff that's helpful, she keeps. Um, so like our X account, there is one reason why we keep our X account. It gives me pain just calling it X.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And that is purely so no one else can take that X account.
That's fair.
Um, but it's like we never understood Twitter. And so just having it so that no one else can have it is good enough.
Yeah, with the limited characters, like I never could get really into Twitter, X, whatever either, just because it felt so limiting, and I'm sure it's valuable to have, and St. Pete has one, obviously, but I don't know what to make of it or how to use it effectively. But also, just like you, I'm like, well, just to make sure nobody else gets it, I just want to have that
Yeah.
locked down. But that makes sense. But I am really, really impressed by your social media presence. I mean, you do really cover all the bases, and they are all very engaging, very inviting, very informative, and just very well done from a graphics perspective, because I think appearances are everything. And I have seen, again, the full gamut of like, this looks like a basic WordPress layout, to this looks like something that was created on GeoCities, to, something that is very, very visually stunning and impressive. And having looked over your site, having looked over your social media, it is very pleasing and inviting to the eye and very engaging. So I do want you to pass along my highest compliments to your
I
partner,
need to
because
get
it
that
is.
on loop
It
to play
is.
for her
Yeah.
because she thinks she's so terrible at it.
Oh, it's so good. Like it really is. It's a very pleasant visual experience, and the way everything is worded, the way everything is laid out, it's very easy and accessible. And it's comfortable, which I think is a good, I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah.
It's very comfortable, and it doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel aggressive like a lot of companies and sales tactics are, that seem like
Mhm.
they're just trying to get your money immediately. No, it seems like more of a community approach than it does a aggressive sales approach. And I
And you
think that's something, a benefit to your mission, I guess, as a store and as a company as well, to try and invite people in and to foster this goodwill that we've been talking about.
and you saw a picture of our greeter,
I did, yes.
the little 7-pound poodle.
Yep, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about, though. That engages. That is comforting. That's something that people can relate to and connect with, and get excited about. It's not just like, hey, new D&D book out, buy it. Hey, new Warhammer set out, buy it. Like, no, it's
Yeah.
like it's got all those personal touches, and it's got that feel, and it I don't
And
know. Like, I'm already
oh,
thinking like, I gotta find a way to get up to Maryland, just because, so I can come visit, just because it
and if
gave me
you
this feel.
and if you look at it, it's I mean this is analyzing analyzing our own thing and my perspective part of my perspective. Every single one of those is a call to action,
Yeah.
which every advertiser will tell you that what you need to do is give, 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 take. And so every fourth post should be a call to action, and everything else is like, hey, I'm giving you this thing to be excited about, this thing to be excited about, this thing to be excited about. Every single of ours is a call to action. Come to our game.
Yeah.
Come get these things. And but because of the attitude that we approach, it is done in a very inviting way. It's the story behind the thing. A lot of advertisers will talk about you need to establish your story.
Hmm.
And that's baked into the comfort, the coziness of our shop, even to our board game selection, is that we focus on those cozy games,
Yeah.
which makes it sometimes weird to think that the game that you're interviewing me about is can be described as it's like playing in the real world with vampires, werewolves, and all these mystical things, and we're actually going through the bad timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. that's that's a that's a very good way to put it. But I think that's what appealed to me about it, was the
Yeah,
aspect and the focus of excuse me, it being storytellers, not dungeon
yeah,
masters or game masters. The fact
Yeah.
that it's a heavy influence of collaborative storytelling. That while you yourself, the one running the game, is the storyteller, every person sitting at that table is also the storyteller. And that the emphasis is on the story, not the mechanics. The mechanics are
Yeah.
kind of a side piece or a tool that you can call upon. Where I've played other games, including D&D and including AD&D and THACO and everything like that, where the mechanics are everything and the story just is a slave to the mechanics. I feel like this, it's like you can use them if you want to. One of my favorite, the game I run, Rage Across Tampa, which is a werewolf game that we stream,
Hmm.
we very rarely use mechanics because I have such a talented group of players who I love very much, who can just roll with anything and who bring their best performances and their most creative ideas. And I get so lost in the immersion of the story that I don't even think to prompt mechanics. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things I love most about World of Darkness is the story
And
element of it.
because of the what I managed to bring to the store, we now have like three other game masters and counting that are like, I could run this stuff too. So like the werewolf game that we're running later this month is just a guy coming in saying, I want to run a werewolf game. All our GMs are doing it because they want to run a game, not because we're telling them how to do it. So their
Right.
participants do. And they get into more of the heavy lore, the grittier storytelling and stuff like that. Just because I've showed them, it's like, hey, let's have a fun time with that. And they're like, this is great. And they learned it all to the point where I think one of our GMs, Charlotte, actually was running games for Renegade during Gen Con.
That's amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was running games for Renegade too, so that's
Yeah.
incredible. I
You might
probably
have ran
was
into
in
her.
meetings with them. Yeah, that's incredible. But yeah, that's what it, like allowing that flexibility, allowing that freedom. Like you do,
Hmm.
in a way, have something for everybody without saying that you're, like you said, advertising to everybody. You still have something for everybody. If you want something that's a little lighter and more focused on adventure, or something that's a
Hmm.
little darker or grittier, it seems like you have offerings of all of that. And I love that anybody can find what they're looking for to some degree with what you're offering, but you're also giving storytellers the room to like flex and stretch and really bring
Yeah.
what they offer to the table. That's such an amazing thing to do as a gaming store.
Just about anyone can sign up to run a game at our store. There's a link on our website that you can go to saying, I want to run something. And we will get you on the schedule and try to find players for you, which means you can bring any weird thing like sexy battle wizards and play it.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Some of the real treats. It was such a treat sitting down and playing Thirsty Sword Lesbians
I
with
was
some
gonna bring that
people.
one up.
I mean, powered by the apocalypse. What is it but just a framework to encourage improv?
An
But
incredible system.
the game loop on that is so great because with the whole you fight someone, through the fight you get to know them, and then you use what you find out about them to solve your problems.
So good. So good. So the last thing I want to talk about, the last kind of overarching topic I want to talk about is the future of the world of darkness as we kind of put a bow on this interview and wrap things up. Fifth edition has taken a rather interesting course of doing things.
Hmm.
They, have laid out their systems in a rather unique way, with obviously starting with vampire, which nobody would have been surprised by, but then dipping into hunter unsuspectingly, which hunter being kind of uh, a niche system within the world of darkness, kind of not one of their three pillars. Then coming to werewolf, what comes next, and why is it most likely mage?
I was just gonna ask you. It's like, do you think it's gonna be Mage next or Changeling?
I
Um,
want it to be Wraith, personally. And there's a whole explanation that my community has heard way too many times as to why it should be Wraith. But I want to hear your thoughts,
and I
seeing where they've been, seeing kind of the path they've taken. Where do you think they are going next? But where do you think they should go next?
if I were gonna start with the easy answer, I think the next book they're gonna do is Changeling.
Okay.
The reason why is because the mechanical difficulties of Mage.
That's what I hope. See, I
Yeah.
hope they take as long as possible on Mage and don't rush it out and have it
Hmm.
break everything, because that's what it will do if it's done wrong. They've done this beautiful thing where they've balanced everything, even cross splat, which was never the
Yeah.
case before now. You could never run werewolf and vampire in the same game effectively. It was not possible.
I
People
mean, you
did
just
it,
had
but
to you just had to lean more on the story of it all because
right,
you knew the power levels weren't there.
right.
And now I'm willing to bet that a high experience werewolf versus a high experience vampire, the vampire is going to win.
It's a little bit
Um,
more even for sure. It's
it
definitely
totally
more
is.
even. Yeah.
Um, but I do think it's going to be Changeling next, and that's because of the mechanical difficulties. As far as what they set up, as far as put inside those books, I think that they set up both equally. Um, and during Extra Life, I do run a crossover game where people can bring whatever character they want in order to do something. This time it's to take down the vampire prince of Pittsburgh, because he he is terrible, and
Yeah.
everyone wants to kill him. Um, the In general, it seems like they're going to continue with the attitudes I'm hearing from my friends that actually worked with Onyx Path, that 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 Paradox is taking and directing their creative teams. I think we're going to continue seeing a here are the tribes, here are the people, and then they can come from anywhere, and they're going to give a lot of flexibility to the players to make their red cap whatever they want the red cap to be, with the basic idea of the red caps are really angry and fighty all the time. Take that um and then let it be open so that people can do what they want with that, because that seems to be what it is. One thing we're talking about is I have a friend that worked with the werewolf book while it was in the hands of Onyx Path, and he was a real fan of hiring experts to make sure that you're doing everything as sensitively as possible, um, trying to make sure that you don't accidentally go and get into the nativism that was in the original books, and caught some things that would have been a real terrible thing if it actually got to print. Um, and one thing he was talking about is that he really wanted them to be able to dig into what does it mean to be a tribe, both in real world and for the werewolves. What does it mean to be a pack? And for that, they need to hire more experts. And apparently the people at Paradox were like, we don't want to get into that. So what we're going to do is back off a little bit more, and just making it so that the werewolf tribes are not linked to any geographies. So you can be a Black Fury from anywhere. And by the way, you don't need to be a woman to be a Black Fury, which I know a lot of people got upset about. I get it. I really do. I saw feminism in the 90s. But I think it's very powerful to say that anyone can be a social justice warrior and fight for for the civil rights of everyone, which
Absolutely.
is kind of like what Black Furies are up to right now.
Right. And they didn't completely gut the ability for you to still do that. And I think this
Yeah.
is something they really encourage more, especially in the Shattered Nation book. Because it's funny, you said that they backed off away from talking about pack dynamics, whereas the Shattered Nation book, a good majority of the book is about pack dynamics and mechanics and stuff like that. So they clearly had a change of mind and brought that all back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do appreciate that they opened it up a little bit more, but they still say, hey, if you want to have, it was, they don't erase the existence of what it used to be. They just say it's no longer that anymore, but you could still have that if you want to in your game.
They
That's still a possibility.
they took away the City of Hats aspect that was in the 90s books.
Right.
I mean, one of the things, love them, hate them, the things with the third and fourth edition World of Darkness stuff is that they in the 90s books, the second edition stuff, is that all of the stories were big world-spanning things where it's easy to lose the fact that you're just one little guy in this huge storyline, and really did a great job of bringing it back down to that personal. And it seems like that they're bringing it back so that the core books are still that very personal story. So you have a lot of flexibility in the story you want to tell from the core book. And then when you want those restrictions, they're going to bring up those stories in the different supplement books. Um,
So you are personally a fan of them easing off the gas pedal of the meta plot, because one of the things that I criticize World of Darkness for in 5th edition is the fact that they have been very, very vague about a lot of elements of the meta plot. Now, thankfully, they've done a little bit better with the Gehenna War book and the Shattered Nation book of filling us in a little bit.
yeah.
But, you know, a lot of unanswered questions. You know, they talk about the conclave in Prague and the murder of Hardestadt by Theo Bell, but we have no information about it, like very little detail about it. Whereas Old World of Darkness, you would have probably had a whole supplement about that entire event in general. Now it's kind of like, we talk vaguely about it, and now we're not going to talk about it anymore, or we're just going to leave it at that.
How much
So,
have how much have you played of the Elder Scrolls properties?
very
Like
online. I've played online primarily, or Skyrim. I played.
yes. What happened to the dwarves?
Good question.
How much do you want to know what happened to the dwarves?
Right,
How much are they going to tell us what happened to the dwarves?
right.
So, and for the people who aren't following, this is a section of the world that is purposefully left to be a mystery. And there's a lot of power in having parts of the world being a mystery. Not only now can the GMs fill in uh, those blank spots. So like I couldn't find anything on Baltimore. I'm running my World of Darkness in Baltimore. I get to make up whatever I want is happening in Baltimore
True.
without having to worry about running up against the meta plot, except for I do anyway.
Yeah.
Um, the So in a lot of ways, the meta plot can restrict the GMs feeling like they have to run it away because someone else who's a lore junkie might come up and say, wait. But the city leader of London is a Ventru, not a Tzimisces.
Right.
And but in my version of the World of Darkness, it's Tzimisces. Um, there's a feeling of restriction from the meta plot because of that, and so it takes away from it being a personal story.
Yeah,
And
that's fair. That is fair. I think that has always been encouraged and allowed. I mean, the first page or first chapter of every role playing book is like, these are guidelines. Do what you want. Like, it's your story, your world. You can do what you want. These are just what we've created or suggested. Um, I was a huge fan of the meta plot. I loved having them have fully fleshed out, detailed cities and events and relationships, partially because it did take some of the pressure off of me. It also created some cool inspiration. It created some cool lore that I could drop into games that people who were lore junkies like me would be like, "Oh yeah, I know about that too," and it would get them
mhm.
excited. Um, but I do see what you're saying and the appeal to that as well. But when
Yeah.
they still hint at meta plot in the books and then don't give us that information, that frustrates me. Like when they introduce a concept like the beckoning, but don't tell us what it actually is or does or means, that
So
frustrates me because I'm like,
going
yeah,
going to our script analysis minds, what do the what do the people in the game, what would they know about the beckoning?
fair,
It's nice to know a little bit more about that for the GMs to be able to like, okay, this is kind of the area, but they leaving that a mystery that partly makes it so that it is a mystery. So even the players who read every inch of the books don't know what the beckoning
true,
is.
true, that's fair.
Um, which is a concept that they absolutely did not support in the second edition books, and they seem to have totally supported in the third and fourth edition books. But
Yeah.
as books come out, they need content, so they're going to fill in back
Well, and
gaps.
I think that's part of my personal anxiety is I could come up with something really cool and then they could release a book that completely discredits everything that I came up with. And while I could continue to run with it, I try. I want to stay as close to what they're intending as possible. So
Yeah.
it is kind of a juggle. But you said that
Hmm.
you want change. You think Changeling should come out next. Now, Changeling fans are kind of divided on this. Would you prefer this new fifth edition iteration of Changeling to be more towards the dreaming or towards the lost? Because a lot of people love the lost, but I also
I
know that there is love for the dreaming as well.
I think that they've pretty much put their flag on the ground that they're going to be bringing it back towards the dreaming,
Okay.
because they're going back to the timelines in the 90s. How that looks is going to be interesting because just like fifth edition Vampire the Masquerade, it's like it's Vampire the Masquerade, just like it was before. Because when the old vampires came up, they're not mindless killing machines. They're like, oh, this is an interesting world. Let's see what's about it.
Yeah.
Um, the Meanwhile, we see in the werewolf book. Yeah, no, it's a continuation of the plot line. Werewolves are in trouble.
Yeah.
Society is breaking down.
Yeah. It's bad.
Um, I get to deal with all the toxic traits in the Cult of Fenris and the Black Spirals.
Yep.
Um, and I love the fact that my players don't trust a single stargazer they
Yeah.
run into,
Yeah.
even though they're like, "We're stargazers. We're here to help.
No, yeah.
Let me patch up this werewolf over here." And it's like that's a Cult of Fenris guy. It's still another werewolf.
It's still a guru. All guru,
um,
right?
the it's that ultimate, it's that mysterious outsider that you get to pull in your games when you need to. And I'm sure that all three of those factions we're going to see ways to make characters for it eventually.
Absolutely.
um and I think that they're going to take some of the things that people really liked out of the Lost and put it into the plot line of the Dreaming,
Yeah. They did it
because
with, I mean, they did it, they incorporated parts of Requiem and parts of a little bit of Forsaken into Werewolf, so I think they
oh
will
yeah,
find ways to incorporate things that people liked from the Lost into it for sure.
I mean, and like personally, I don't remember where they left off in the plot, in the meta plot in back in the 90s for Changeling.
Everything was over. That was where they left off.
It's like,
They said it was done, so who knows?
yeah, everyone was focused on what was happening with the vampires and the werewolves, and so I didn't hear much talk about what the novelizations talked about, the end of the Changeling or the end of the mages.
Right.
Um, I mean, the mages probably just fell asleep and dreamt up their new world anyway. So,
Exactly.
um, but I mean, heck, I wouldn't be surprised if even that they do all of the books eventually, just
Right.
because, uh, particularly if the system that they made with fifth edition ages well, because they're being very slow with their books. We're liable to see more and more of the old stuff get reprints
Yeah.
because they're gonna want to make more money, so they need
They
content
need
to
more
make the
content.
money.
Absolutely. Like
And
I'd love to see them bring back the By Night books. I really hope they do. I hope we get some city books because I loved those books
I mean,
personally. Like,
I got Chicago on my shelf.
yep.
Um I got London that I can order.
I want
The
Miami, but I'm a Florida guy, so of course I want Miami. But I want Miami. The story of Miami is needs more detail. But
Oh yeah. Um I mean, heck, one interesting thing to bring up with the way that like the order that they came up with, and we never know if this is going to happen for Changeling or Mage, is the werewolf book was done before Hunter.
yep.
It was up for pre-order. I could put in my numbers in there, and then they had to pull the plug on it, and
Well,
that's why Hunter came first.
that's what I'm hoping is that they drop a changeling or a wraith next. That they don't put out their three pillars, which have always been vampire,
Hmm.
werewolf, and mage. I hope they save mage till very, very last. Get all of the properties out and then drop mage because
And
mage is the world changer.
I think the indie role playing community is more equipped now than they were when it first came out to handle Wraith,
Yep,
because back in the back in the day, it was such a weird concept
it
of like,
was.
what do you mean you can't touch anything?
Yeah, it was a
What do you
very difficult game to wrap your head around. But now that we've had
Yeah,
games like Exalted and games like we've had all these really out of left field concepts now, I think people can handle it. I think people can,
yeah,
can grasp the mechanics and the possibilities and the story options that a game like Wraith could present.
yeah.
Yeah,
And we have more mechanics that people are familiar with to be able to handle that.
absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so I mean, it's some interesting things. I'm eager to see them come up. I want them to come out faster because I want to see it come out.
Oh,
But
yeah.
at the same time, I know that the slow pace that they're doing is beneficial for coming out with higher quality products.
Well, it's kind of like your store. Like you said, other models of stores tend to make money faster, but
Hmm.
I believe slow pace wins the race. The slow,
Yeah,
steady build is going to win the race in the long run. So I'd rather they take their time and release a good product than rush something out that isn't tested, that's broken. I mean, even the first book of Vampire in fifth edition they released, they ended up having to release an addendum, and then they had to
yeah,
reprint it, and then they had to and there were issues in the werewolf book they released. There were
yeah.
typos in there are issues still, and these things are still taking a long
Shit,
time to get released
shoot,
and getting
man.
delayed, but they're
The
still having
large,
issues.
the largest role-playing company in the world right now just released a book with typos.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And it just doesn't seem like that should be a thing. But before we put a bow on this thing, and I
Yep.
have you give one last plug for the store, I want to do our giveaway tonight. So we've been doing a dice giveaway all night long. You can win some Gen Con traveled We're World of Darkness dice that I took with me to Indianapolis that were played with in a game of Vampire the Masquerade or Werewolf the Apocalypse. And all night long, you could have put in hashtag Dice Me Please, PLZ, to be in the running for those dice. So we're going to make that drawing right now. And tonight's winner of this set of dice to be shipped out to them is Tess. Tess, congratulations. You win a set of D10s for Vampire the Masquerade, for Hunter the Reckoning, for Werewolf the Apocalypse. These are yours, so I will be in touch with you immediately to get your shipping information and have those shipped out to you ASAP. But congratulations, Tess, and thank you so much for being in tonight's stream, and thank you so much for entering into the contest. So, Stuart, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me tonight. I feel like we could still talk for like another 2 or 3 hours. There's so many more questions I have, so I'm going to have you back at some point to do a follow up, especially after the release of whatever the next system is, especially if it's Changeling, because it sounds like Changeling is one of the games that you hold near and dear to your heart. So, I would love to hear your thoughts on it when that gets released. But I want you to now take this time to tell our community, which is spread out all across the world, all across these United States, why they should come to your store. Because I'm already interested in taking a special trip to Maryland just to check out your store. But let's do a sales pitch to anybody who watches this interview as to why they should stop by Three Gear Games.
Well, because we if a open and welcoming environment like people have not been able to find anywhere else in the country. But of course, since we do want people to be able to enjoy stuff all over the world, you can also visit our website to pick up some of our merch at Three Gear Games, threegearstudios.com. As well as if you just like the concept of what we're doing, you can go to our Patreon. Um, but of course, we have all kinds of opportunities to just do good with gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. So you should head over to threegearstudios.com. Check out their website. It is actually really pretty and really comfortable to look at, and it is a very nicely functional website. It's easy to navigate. I got a chance to explore it myself over the last few days, and it's just a lot of fun to look at. But besides that, you should also head on over to their link tree, which is linktree/3gear games. You can join their Discord. You can check out their Facebook. You can go give them a follow on all of their various social media. There's so much to absorb there. Even if you're not in the Maryland area, let's go support them because they are an LGS and we love supporting LGSs. And if you know anyone in the Maryland area, let them know. Get them to go visit themselves because we want to support these businesses and see them thrive, especially those that endorse a hobby we love so much, like the World of Darkness.
Send your pet pics.
Yeah, and send your pet pics for sure. Stewart, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I really, really wish you and your business the best. It seems like your heads are in the right place and that you offer something incredible and unique to the TTRPG community as a whole. And it's really good to see businesses like yours succeeding, especially in a post-pandemic world that killed so many great businesses. To see you continue to thrive and continue to grow, even if it is slower than other businesses would, that's not a bad thing because it means you're going to withstand, the ever evolving market. And I really, yeah.
And it's growing how we want it.
It's growing how you want it. That's the best way you can possibly state it. So for Stewart and Kent, thank you all so much for watching. Go follow St. Pete by Night while you're following things on all social media. And if you're interested in getting into the World of Darkness, learning a little bit more about it, you can join our Discord community. The link is down in the description down below. We offer one-shots. We offer chronicles. We offer streams, all kinds of entertainment and opportunities for you to get involved with the World of Darkness. But this has been After Dark. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Have a good evening, everyone.
This has been a St. Petersburg by Night production. After Dark is produced in agreement with the World of Darkness and Dark Pact. The host for After Dark is Kent. Visit our website at stpbynight.com for more information about all of our productions and how you can become part of our community. Thank you for listening. Until next time, fangs, stakes, and claws out.